Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DMV Confidential. I'm Kenzie Chase.
And I'm Jenny Gable.
And today we have a brand new episode for you. So this story that we want to talk to you guys about today is actually pretty unique and has quite a few twists and turns in it. And I don't think you're going to expect it because the way we thought the story was going to go ended up completely different when we actually sat down to write it. So the story we want to talk to you guys about today is from a 1971 case of a Jane Doe from Howard County.
Yeah, so as you said, Kenzie, this case is definitely a unique one. It all started on July 15th, 1971, though, in Howard County, when a woman was actually found unconscious in a field there. So two teenagers were riding motorcycles in the field and discovered this woman, and they ended up calling police. She was unconscious. And so police responded to kind of see and learn more about what was going on.
Yeah, so she was found around the early afternoon. Mm-hmm. Police did say, we spoke to one of the detectives on this cold case, and he did say that it was like a sunny day. It was like a warm day. You know, she was found in sort of this field. And they do pretty early on are able to determine that this was suspicious. I mean, especially because she was found the way she was found. I mean, she was found with pretty much nothing from the waist down. Mm-hmm. All those clothes had been removed, and so they did kind of assume and kind of come to the conclusion that this was a sexual assault.
Yeah, without getting into too much graphic details, as you said, Kenzie, she didn't have any clothes on from the waist down, and as you mentioned, the weather, it was like a sunny day. They noticed that she appeared to have noticeable sunburns as well, which indicated that she had been there for quite some time.
Right. So when she was initially found, she was actually semi-conscious, and she was actually sent to the hospital in a semi-conscious state. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, weeks or months later, even in the hospital, she died and she was pronounced dead.
Yeah, so she was never able to speak to investigators when they found her anytime when she was in the hospital because she was semi-conscious and wasn't able to talk to them. But on September 7th, 1971, about 2 months after she'd been found in the field is when she passed away. And I believe her official cause of death was...
Yeah, it was a stroke. Her official cause of death was a stroke. But again, she was left in the field. Investigators weren't able to determine if that was where the assault happened or if something happened somewhere else and then she was sort of left there. Mm-hmm. But they did say that sort of area where she was found, that field, is also sort of known as, quote, Lover's Lane. And that's where people are known to go to sort of have sexual relations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they didn't know exactly how she got there, but she didn't have any identification on her at all. So they had no way to really identify who she was. And for this time period, again, like the internet, things like that aren't around. So she wasn't able to speak to them.
And what a terrible way to be found also. They were able to identify quickly that it was a sexual assault. I mean, she was found with no clothes on the bottom, just kind of left there in a field and was burning. She was suffering from serious dehydration.
Yeah, I think the hospital estimated that she was out in the field for around 12 hours at least. And I know that the detective that we spoke to mentioned that she had her lower left abdomen had, I believe, some bruising on her lower left abdomen. Right. So it was definitely, they believed that she was assaulted.
This whole case starts with sort of just trying to identify this woman. And for more than 54 years, that mystery remains unsolved.
Yeah. But for years, they're not able to tell who she is. You know, there's no identification on her. They're not able to find anybody connected to her. They don't know who she is. But really with advances in technology like we see in a lot of these cases, they're able to figure out.
Yeah, and so it was when Detective Wade Zufald got the case that he was able to sort of look back into the information. And this was actually unique in the sense that they got a lot of DNA from her at the time. They got duplicates of a lot of her major organs, heart, liver, kidneys, correct me if I'm wrong on any of those, but duplicates of these major organs. And so when Detective Zufald got this case, that was good news to him because that means, he could take those samples and run it through the technology that we have today and see if there was sort of a hit. And if it didn't come with a hit or anything back, they still had that spare so that they could test it later. And so I want to play a quick soundbite from him of him sort of explaining the logic behind that.
So that meant to me as an investigator, that let's see if science is there right now. We could use these duplicate slides. And you know what? If it doesn't work out, we still have those same slides to hold on to eventually wait for science to catch up.
Yeah, so that's him kind of going into what we just talked about, that there are these duplicate slides, and so they want to see if, they can get something from this.
Yeah, and they're technically, I guess the official name for them is histology slides, which I just found it very interesting. When she died during the autopsy, they were able to collect this from her major organs. So they did have the histology slides. I believe they had 9, is what Detective Zufall had told us.
Yeah,
so,
and
yeah,
just a little side note, but it was kind of interesting when he brought it up to us, but he was able to sort of get some of the help and recruit some help from some of the interns to help with this case. And so I'm sure as an intern, they were like super eager to help. But I think it's important to mention them because there's a lot of people that kind of go on behind the scenes that don't necessarily get the forefront.
Yeah. There's like a lot of hands that work in a case like this. So, yeah.
But yeah, they take the slides and they're sort of able to, we talked about some familiar DNA before in some of our other cases, Leslie Prier, for example, but they're able to sort of take these slides and create sort of a family tree, and they send it off to a place in Texas, and the family tree comes back and they say, hey, well, we think she might have some sort of connection to this guy who's living in Ohio.
Yeah. And they thought him to be a distant relative, maybe second or third cousin of this woman.
Right. So they try to get a hold of this person. His name's Sarah Sharkey, but he goes by Chuck. And they try to get a hold of him. And detective initially, he calls. He gets hung up on. He doesn't get a response back. Finally, Charles, this is actually very smart on him, but he actually calls Howard County Police to confirm that, hey, you guys are trying to reach out to me about this. Is that correct? And then from there, they were like, yes, we're trying to get in contact with you. And they were put in touch.
Which is a smart thing to do because you always wonder if you're in a situation like that, you're getting a call from a detective.
Yeah, detective,
who's probably
hey,
just taken back by.
Yeah, can we get your DNA to see if you're related to this missing person? Like I would be a little confused by that. How did you get my number would be my first thing. But so they kind of, he finally agrees and he kind of takes a DNA swab and it comes back. And this is a first twist.
Yeah.
Twist number 1 is it's not a distant relative. It's
his mother.
Son.
Yeah. The Jane Doe was his mother.
Yes.
Yes. So that, to detectives that were working on this came as a shock to them as well, because this whole time they thought maybe it was a distant relative. They're building out this family tree with this technology, but it's actually the biological son.
Right. So then they kind of are able to kind of go through some of the court records and stuff like that. They're actually able to find this woman's birth certificate, and they were able to identify her from her birth certificate as Sadie Belle Murray, her mother's maiden name. I guess her mother at one point had married someone, but that wasn't her biological father.
Yeah, so her mother ended up marrying a man then named Charles Leroy Miller, which, as you said, wasn't her biological father. But at some point along the way, Sadie changed her name to Sarah, which detectives told us is like a common
name for Sadie, I guess, like a common
nickname.
Right.
Yeah, so she started going by Sarah Belle Miller.
Right, and then eventually she gets married, and that's where the Sharkey comes from, because she eventually changes her name to Sarah Belle Sharkey, and that's kind of where they kind of get the name of this Jane Doe. So that was already a shock, and usually we wouldn't try to put this early on in the case, but there's so much more.
Yeah, I think this case has a lot more
than
to
just
it.
Yeah. The identification is crazy on its own. This is a 54-year-old cold case where they weren't even to identify the woman, much less who did it, but just the woman herself.
I believe it's the oldest cold case homicide for Howard County.
Yes, I believe that's correct, Jenny, yeah. It's the oldest cold case where they were finally able to identify her, which is just, it's crazy to me.
It's mind-boggling.
And from there, they're able to sort of try to get in contact and try to find out more information about Sarah. Well, she actually had 3 children. So we already found out about Charles, but she actually had 2 more. She had Charles had an older sister named Mildred, and he had a younger sister named Judith. And when they were younger, before Sarah was ever found dead, or found and then later died, before that ever happened, they actually were adopted out. They were sent to an orphanage at super young ages. I believe it was 2, 4, and 5, something like that.
I believe Charles, who goes by Chuck, told us he was 5 years old when he was
right. And then maybe his sister was like 6 or something like that. She's a little bit older than him. But they all kind of were sent to an orphanage way before this ever happened. So they didn't really even know their mom too much.
Have any really memory of her.
Yes, correct. But then Judith, the youngest, she was about 2, so she actually got adopted out pretty early on. And it was Mildred and Chuck that kind of grew up in foster care more.
And I believe Mildred also goes by Marie.
Right.
So if we say Marie at any point, that's Mildred goes by Marie. But yeah, so Detective Zufall is able to speak with Chuck and, gives him the news that this woman is his mother. And from there, he's actually able to get into contact with Mildred as well.
Yes, but he gets into contact through Mildred by actually a distant relative that kind of vaguely knew the family. She had mentioned something about Marie, because originally, he's looking for a Mildred. And then finally they're like, something about Marie. Well, Marie was Mildred's middle name. And so he tries to get in contact with a phone number connected to Marie and didn't get a hold of her, but then finds the number for Marie's daughter. And that must have been such a crazy phone call, because
I can't even imagine.
Detective Zufall even said that it was like he's like, calls this woman up and is like, this is probably going to be the weirdest phone call you've ever heard, but is your mom's full name Mildred Marie Sharkey? Yes. Was she put in an orphanage at a super young age? Yes. And then he was like, well, I think I found her brother. And kind of catches up and puts the whole thing together, and she was able to connect him to Marie.
Yeah. And I believe Detective Zufall told us like that when he gave Mildred this news that she was just had a very emotional reaction. I mean, I can't even imagine all these years you didn't really know your family or your siblings or your mother, so they can get a phone call like this.
Except Marie herself did know her siblings. In fact,
she did have some memory of them.
She had been trying to find her brother, especially, for years.
Yeah.
But was never really able to get in contact. So when she found out the news that, they were put in contact, and Detective Zufall told her, like, your brother is still alive. And keep in mind, this case happened in 1971. Marie is like 81 years old, and Chuck is like 79. So they're in their like late 70s, early 80s, and she finally gets the news after all this time that her brother is still alive and they found him.
Yeah, because you really only like have distant memories of this person. You don't even really remember or knew your mother. So then I just can't even imagine that phone call. But I know that he told us that she was, she right away wanted to get in contact with her brother and be able to talk to him for the first time in years.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of interesting because the whole thing kind of just shows like how much detective work is still relevant, even though the case is 54 years old, just because they were able to put them back in contact. In fact, it kind of has another twist, because obviously these two had a younger sister, Judith. Well, Judith's story is a little bit different, where he was able to sort of track her down to some extent. She had put in an ad, a classified ad in an Ohio newspaper, which is where they're from originally. And she had put in there, if, like in 1970,
I believe it was 1975.
Something like that. Yeah, 1975. She had put there, if you are Mildred Sharkey or know the whereabouts about Mildred Sharkey and Charles Sharkey, please contact Judith Sharkey at this phone number.
Yeah. So they were actually able to, she wasn't able to get into contact with them. They never saw the ad, but Detective Zufall is able to kind of track her down and see that she was in New Orleans and that she actually passed away around 2020.
Yeah, so this is different, obviously, than the fact that Mildred and Chuck, were able to, they were both alive and they were able to get put back in contact. But Judith, unfortunately, she did pass away in 2020. And I think that was a little sad for the detective, because you obviously want to
be able
reunite
to reunite everybody.
all of the siblings. But he was able to find sort of where she was.
And this part's actually crazy to me. They found out that her ashes were actually still on the coroner's shelf. So they knew where her remains were, which he was, when speaking to us, mentioned that in a lot of cases like this, when the body is kind of, given to the state, that after all this time, they wouldn't know exactly, where they are, but they still had them.
For context, usually when someone doesn't, because her body was never like accepted by someone else. So that means she just didn't have a family member that like came and accepted the body to do, their own burial or whatever. And so when that happens, the funeral partners up with the coroner's office, and the coroner's office cremates them and takes their ashes and basically like puts them sort of on a shelf. And then they usually don't last that long.
They're not, he had mentioned to us maybe, sometimes months, but at this point, 2020, this is kind of unfolding in 2024.
Right. So this is all happening in sort of real time, where the fact that he calls them up and says, hey, I'm looking for this person. Okay, well, it says that her ashes are still here. He's like, do me a favor. I need you to go and put eyes on it. They call him back about 15 minutes later. Yes, we're looking at the ashes, like at the like whatever it's called. They're looking at it.
Yes.
And they say, I don't know how it's here, but it's here.
Yeah.
And I think that's just so crazy.
Kind of a miracle in itself, honestly. Yeah. Because, at least in that way, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but there's a chance that, her ashes can be accepted by her siblings, finally.
Right. So, and I think this whole thing is crazy too, because think about how we started this story. I mean, we started it with something so
grim,
tragic, grim, upsetting, and there's like, I hate to say silver lining, but it kind of is.
Yeah, I mean, through the detectives and, the investigative work here and advances in technology and things like that, they're really able to reunite these siblings. They were, Mildred and Charles specifically, were in and out of the orphanage and things like that. And Charles, which we'll talk about more later, but he actually kind of ran away when he was 15 from the orphanage. And, the siblings weren't, for decades, weren't in contact with each other.
Right. And I think that's so cool, because they even start saying that they contact each other regularly, they FaceTime, they chat. In fact, they're actually planning to reunite, which is, so they're actually helping coordinate a reunion between Marie and Chuck. And we had talked to Chuck about this. He's a very sweet man. And we asked him, do you have any plans for when your sister comes? And this is kind of what he had to say.
A death certificate.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
And am I planning anything big? Seeing each other is going to be huge. Huge. We'll see.
I mean, you can just see he was so excited. And Chuck himself actually has a pretty interesting story, because he actually doesn't remember his family at all. Marie kind of had some memory of them growing up in the orphanage, and they were on separate sides, but she says that she remembers playing with him.
That they would see each other on and off while living there.
Yeah, and according to the detective, she also said that Chuck was always trying to get her in trouble and trying to get him to run away with him. Run away. And she has all these memories of sort of their upbringing to some extent, and he has no memory. And I think part of that is just because Chuck himself actually had several a series of life events that were pretty drastic.
I mean, he really had, a rough upbringing. When he spoke to us, he mentioned that in the orphanage, obviously, that was very difficult. And at one point, he was placed into a foster home, and that was not a good situation for him.
He had a very abusive foster home situation to the point where he actually ran away when he was 15.
Yeah, so he ran away, and he actually joined the service. I believe he mentioned that he was in the Army.
And then not only did he join the Army, but he actually served during war times. So he served in correct me if I'm wrong, but the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And at one point, he was a war prisoner.
Yeah, so he was a prisoner of war. I believe he told us he served from 1964 to 1966. But, with his really just rough upbringing and then having to go through something like that, his wife was also on the call, and she had mentioned that, she believes that he really just blocked out, his brain just blocked out a lot of his upbringing and, his early life.
It's amazing what the brain will do to try to
protect you
from trauma, and sometimes your brain just can't even process that amount. And so, he actually doesn't remember any of the stories that Marie really was telling him about trying to get her to run away, trying to them playing in the orphanage. And I can't imagine that kind of carrying that with Marie, that she has these memories. And in fact, they were actually searching for Chuck for a long time.
Yeah, I believe his nieces, he has 3 nieces, I believe, and they were writing letters over the years to Charles Sharkeys around the country in the area, trying to get in contact. And sometimes they would get responses from people who were like, I'm not who you're looking for, but good luck. And then a lot of times people didn't respond. So, he says, he never got any letters. So there was obviously, they weren't able to reach him.
Right, but they had been trying this whole time to reconnect with him. And like you mentioned, I mean, the nieces sending out letters, just like blind letters to any Charles Sharkey that they could find, really just shows that he was their missing piece to their family. They really felt that they needed to reunite with him. Yeah. And I think it's so I
feel like even, not to cut you off, Kenzie, but even just talking about it and rewatching him speak about it, it just kind of really gets you emotional. I feel like I'm tearing up just even thinking about it because, I have a lot of siblings myself, and I can't even imagine, all those years, and then you get this phone call and it really just changes everything. You're able to get into contact.
And Chuck even says that he had been living on his own for so long. I mean, he ran away at 15, then later joined the military. Then, eventually, yes, he got married, and we kind of heard his wife in that video that we played. But for most of his life, he was on his own. And so finally to find out that he has family, and not only that, but that his family had been searching for him, the family that wanted to be a part of his life, I can't imagine how much that must be, that must feel.
I can't even comprehend it. And I know that, he had told us also that, after the services and things like that, he was just really, I believe he met his wife in the 90s. He may have told us 1996, but he was, on his own independent for a very long time. I believe he got 5 certifications in the trades and things like that. He was really able to build a life for himself.
Right.
Even though he experienced all of these big challenges.
Right. And I want to talk about Detective Zufall through all this because he really did a lot of work. I mean, he didn't just identify a Jane Doe. He brought a family back together. And I had asked him, do you get emotionally invested in these cases? And this is what he had to say.
Definitely involved physically and emotionally, probably too much. I don't recommend that to any of the investigators that I work with because you do get physically and emotionally involved. You do feel like you're a part of the family, and you don't want to disappoint the family per se. So, yeah, I do put a lot of time and effort into these cases, and it's.
He gets really emotionally involved. In fact, when we say a family, he says he's part of the family, and I think when we talk about the family reunion that's coming up.
It's October 19th.
It's October 19th. So it's October 9th. It's on October 19th. By the time you guys hear this episode, it'll already have happened. So we're going to add some photos onto it for you guys. But they have this reunion, and it was a surprise for Marie, because Marie obviously knew that Chuck was going to be there.
Yeah, I believe she's going to Chuck's house because she lives in Springfield, Illinois.
She lives
I believe
in
he's in Ohio.
And he lives in Ohio. And Marie is coming to Chuck, and detectives also worked through all this effort to sort of bring Judith's remains, because remember, Judith is still there, and in real time he was coordinating efforts to bring Judith's ashes to his siblings for a proper burial. And I think that was so special too, as well, the fact that they had this effort together to bring all three siblings together, even though Judith fortunately never really got to have that closure she wanted in this life of finding her siblings, even though she tried to look for them. But her siblings want to be reunited with her now. And I think that is something super cool. And in fact, Jane Doe, Miss Sarah Sharkey, the one who started this whole case, her body is now currently sitting in sort of a gravesite that's used for people that donate their bodies for science. And every year they have sort of a ceremony where they kind of go through all the people that were in the gravesite, and that's sort of something that's special that they do in Maryland, where she's buried. So detective said that she's already sort of taken care of as far as she gets the ceremony regularly. And so they're kind of doing this separate thing for Judith and trying to give her this closure.
Which I believe in the clip that we had played of Chuck, it's kind of in the beginning, if you could hear, they were kind of talking about that would be the hope and the plan, is that when they get together with Marie, that they're able to get Judith's ashes and have this little ceremony for her. But no matter what, just even seeing his sister is like a huge thing.
Detective Zufel actually got to be there at the reunion. So on October 19th, the family reunites, and Detective Zufel got to be there because, like we had said earlier, he feels like he's part of the family. In fact, I'm sure they feel like he's part of the family at this point, because he helped close such a large mystery in their life.
Yeah, I believe he said that him and Chuck specifically are in close contact and talk on the phone a lot. And I know that Chuck told us that him and Marie have been having phone calls pretty much every single day since they found out about each other in July, when Marie found out that, this is who her brother is and this was who her mother is. So they've really just been able to reconnect as a family.
Right. Well, so that's how this case ends. And we're going to post all the photos on our website with this video. So if you guys want to go check those out as well on our website, I encourage you to do so.
But just one last thing I did mean to mention, I guess, in reference to Sarah Sharkey, her homicide case does remain open. They still don't know who committed this act, but the family in the end is able to reunite.
Right. So still a mystery there, but at the end, there's a silver lining. If you guys want to see more of these episodes, we encourage you to tune back in next week, and we'll see you then.